I volunteered to sit next to a dead man on a plane. His eyes kept moving, and I wish I never looked at what he was staring at. The man in 43A died halfway across the Atlantic. I heard him gasping from my seat near the front, loud at first, then quiet. A wet gurgling sound, then nothing. The pilot asked for medical professionals. There were none. After a few minutes, a flight attendant simply buckled the body back into his window seat and covered his face with a blanket. His name was Molyneux. Heart attack, probably. The pilot said we were turning back to New York and asked for a volunteer to sit next to the deceased. The current seatmate, a teenager, looked ready to vomit. I don't know why I raised my hand. Morbid curiosity. Maybe. My vacation was ruined anyway. I regretted it the second I saw him. Molyneux sat upright between the window and empty aisle seat, strapped at the waist, blue blanket covering his torso and head. His hands rested on his lap above the seatbelt, fingers twisted into claws. I couldn't stop imagining what his face looked like under that blanket. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. When I woke, the cabin lights were off. Most passengers were sleeping. I looked toward the window and froze. The shade was open. I was certain it had been closed when I sat down. Then I noticed something else. Molyneux's posture had changed. The blanket looked twisted, like he'd been fidgeting. Very slowly, knowing it was insane, I lifted the corner of the blanket. His shirt was unbuttoned from the failed resuscitation. Blue-gray skin, white chest hair. I lifted higher. His collar was flecked with dried blood. Then I pulled the blanket entirely off and bit back a scream. Molyneux's head was turned toward the window, not just tilted, fully rotated, like he was staring outside. I could see his face reflected in the plexiglass, pale, drawn, lips parted, jaw slack, completely dead, except his eyes. They were moving, left to right, tracking something in the darkness outside. The woman across the aisle snapped at me. "What are you doing?" "Cover him back up." Before I could answer, the plane dropped. Coffee cup slammed against the ceiling. A man nearly tumbled from his seat. Call lights went off everywhere as passengers jolted awake. The pilot came on, voice shaken. "Weather along our flight path is clear. No other planes reporting turbulent. Not sure what this is." Even as he spoke, the shaking got worse. I forced myself to look at Molyneux again. The jolt had pitched him forward, head colliding with the seat in front, but his face was still turned toward the window, neck twisted at an impossible angle, and his eyes still moving, left to right, left to right. I looked past the reflection, at the sky itself. It wasn't black anymore. It was dark green, like pea soup, thick, almost solid. Shapes swirled inside it, massive and formless. The plane shuddered harder. Molyneux's body swung like a pendulum, back into his seat, sideways into me, that feeling of dead flesh pressing against me, cold and heavy. Then the opposite way, face slamming into the window. I unbuckled and locked myself in the bathroom behind my row. I couldn't sit next to him anymore. For 30 minutes, I braced against the walls, listening to call buttons and crying passengers. Then the captain's voice, cutting in and out. Extremely anomalous weather. Everyone in emergency position. If we depressurize, the turbulence stopped for 5 seconds. Then the plane became a washing machine. I crawled back to my seat. Flight attendants were sprawled in the aisles. Overhead bins had burst open. Passengers were praying. And Molyneux was still there, whipping back and forth. Thwack! His head hit the window. Thwack! Again. The plexiglass ballooned outward with each impact. Thwack! I grabbed his shoulders, trying to stop him, but I couldn't hold him. Thwack! 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 I wasn't sure anymore if it was just the turbulence moving him. It looked deliberate, desperate. Karkur! Something cracked, not his skull, the window. The green fog outside was alive with shapes now, pressing against the glass, writhing, reaching. Karkum! The window exploded outward. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. Molyneux's mangled head hung outside the plane, body straining to follow, held only by his seatbelt. The alarm screamed. Debris flew toward the hole he'd made. The pilot's voice. Cabin breach. Limited oxygen. Trying to descend, but this storm, or whatever it is, I put on my mask. Through the broken window, I could see Molyneux's head outside, hair whipping in the wind, and his eyes still moving, still tracking, watching something approach. That's when I understood. He wasn't trying to escape. He was trying to warn us. The things in the fog, he'd seen them first. Somehow, even in death, his eyes kept watching, kept trying to tell us, and I'd covered him with a blanket. Ignored him. Thought he was just a corpse. I reached over his lap and unclasped his seatbelt. There was a sickening crunch as his shoulders compressed, squeezed through the window frame. Then he was gone. A pale body tumbling end over end into darkness, into the green fog, into whatever was waiting. The turbulence stopped immediately. The fog lifted. Within seconds, the sky was clear and black and normal. The plane descended until we could breathe without masks. An hour later, we landed at JFK. Investigators called it a localized weather anomaly, said debris must have broken the window, causing sudden decompression that ejected the body. But I know what I saw. And last night, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. with my head turned toward my bedroom window. I couldn't move my neck, couldn't close my eyes. They were tracking something in the darkness outside, something massive, something green, left to right, left to right. And I realized with absolute horror that Molyneux didn't fall into the fog. He was taken, and now whatever took him knows where I live.